I was 17 years old when I first heard Adrian play guitar, and I didn't know then that the sound of his fingers on those strings would follow me for the next 57 years. It was the summer of 1966, and my parents had decided I needed culture, refinement, something to do besides working at my father's hardware store. So they found Adrian through a notice at the community centre, a 24-year-old music teacher who gave lessons in his small apartment above the bakery on Maple Street. I remember climbing those narrow stairs for the first time, smelling bread and cinnamon, hearing the faint sound of classical guitar drifting down to meet me. I knocked on his door, not knowing that I was about to meet the person who would change everything about how I understood myself and what I wanted from life. He opened the door, and I saw him for the first time, really saw him, and something shifted in my chest that I couldn't name. Adrian had dark hair that fell across his forehead, gentle brown eyes, and hands that looked like they were made for creating beautiful things. He smiled at me, this warm, genuine smile, and said, "Welcome. You must be Owen. Come in." His apartment was small but filled with light from tall windows, and there were guitars everywhere, hanging on walls, propped in corners, lying on the couch. Sheet music covered every surface. He cleared a space for me to sit and handed me a guitar, his fingers brushing mine for just a moment, and I felt that touch like electricity. That first lesson, he sat close to me, closer than I expected, showing me how to hold the instrument, how to position my fingers on the frets. I could smell his cologne, something woody and warm, and I could feel the heat of his body next to mine. He put his hand over mine to guide my fingers into the right position for a C chord, and his voice was soft and patient as he said like this, "Feel how your fingers curve. That's it. You're doing great." I wasn't paying attention to the guitar at all. I was paying attention to the way his hair fell when he leaned forward, the concentration on his face, the gentleness in his touch. I was 17, and I had never felt anything like this before, this awareness of another person, this wanting to be near someone, to have them notice me, to matter to them. The lessons were twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 in the afternoon. I lived for those afternoons. I practiced obsessively between lessons, not because I cared about becoming a great guitarist, though I told myself that's what it was, but because I wanted Adrian to be proud of me, to smile at me the way he did when I got something right, to say, "Good job, Owen, you're really improving." I wanted his approval like I wanted air. I started noticing everything about him. The way he hummed while he played, the way he closed his eyes when the music moved him, the way he laughed at his own mistakes. I noticed that he drank his coffee black, and that he had a small scar on his left hand, and that he always wore the same silver ring on his right thumb. By the third week we had started talking between exercises, real conversations about music and life and dreams. He told me he had moved to our town from Chicago, that he had studied at a conservatory, that he wanted to compose his own music someday, but for now he taught to pay the bills. He asked me about my life, what I wanted to do after high school, what made me happy. No adult had ever asked me these things before, not like he did, like he actually cared about the answers. I found myself telling him things I had never told anyone, about how I felt trapped in my small town, how I wanted something more but didn't know what, how I sometimes felt like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. He listened with his whole attention, nodding, understanding in his eyes, and when I finished he said, "I think a lot of people feel that way, Owen, like they're waiting for their real life to begin, and I think music can help us figure out who we really are." Something was growing between us, something I couldn't name but could feel every time I walked up those stairs. It wasn't just the guitar anymore. Sometimes after my lesson we would just sit and talk for an hour, drinking coffee, watching the light change through the windows. He played me pieces he was working on, asking my opinion like it mattered, like I was someone whose thoughts had value. He told me about his life in Chicago, about the man he had lived with there, and when he said it, when he said he, my heart started pounding so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. He looked at me carefully when he said it, watching my reaction, and I tried to keep my face neutral, but I think something showed, because he said, "It's okay, Owen. I just wanted you to know who I am." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed thinking about what he had told me, thinking about the way I felt when I was near him, thinking about all the things I had never let myself think about before. I'd always known on some level that I was different, that the way other guys talked about girls didn't match how I felt, but I had pushed it down, ignored it, told myself I just hadn't met the right person yet, But now, lying there in the dark, I let myself think about Adrian, really think about him, about his smile and his hands and the way he looked at me sometimes, and I felt terrified and exhilarated and more awake than I'd ever been. The next lesson, I was nervous, my hands shaking as I tried to play the piece I'd practiced. He noticed immediately and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Hey, what's wrong? You seem upset." I couldn't look at him. I said, "I'm fine, just tired," but my voice came out wrong, too tight, too high. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "Owen, you can talk to me about anything, you know that, right?" And something in his voice, the gentleness of it, the sincerity, made my eyes sting with tears. I put the guitar down and I said, "I've been thinking about what you told me, about Chicago, about your life, and I think maybe I understand why you told me." He waited, not pushing, just present, and I took a breath and said, "I think I might be like you. I think I might be the same way, and I'm scared." He moved closer to me on the couch, close enough that our knees were touching, and he said, "There's nothing to be scared of, Owen. There's nothing wrong with you. You're exactly who you're supposed to be." I looked at him and his eyes were so kind, so understanding, and I felt something break open in my chest, some wall I had been building for years. I said, "I've never told anyone this before, I've never even said it out loud," and he said, "You don't have to say anything you don't want to say, but if you want to talk, I'm here, I'm listening." And so I talked. I told him about feeling different, about pretending, about the fear that had lived in my stomach for as long as I could remember. He listened to everything, and when I finished, he said, "I know exactly how you feel. I felt all of those things, and I promise you it gets easier. You won't always feel this afraid." After that conversation, something shifted between us. The lessons continued, but they became something more, a space where I could be honest, where I could ask questions, where I could figure out who I was. Adrian never pushed me, never made me uncomfortable, but he was there, steady and patient, answering my questions, sharing his own experiences, helping me understand that I wasn't alone. And somewhere in all of that talking and learning and growing, I realized I was falling in love with him. It wasn't just gratitude or admiration or the relief of being understood, though it was all of those things. It was the way my heart lifted when I saw him, the way I thought about him constantly, the way I wanted to make him happy, to be near him, to matter to him the way he mattered to me. I didn't tell him. I was 17 and he was 24 and my teacher, and I understood even then that there were lines that shouldn't be crossed, that what I felt was real but complicated, that he was being responsible and kind by maintaining boundaries, even as he helped me understand myself. But I think he knew anyway. I think he saw it in the way I looked at him, in the way I hung on his words, in the way I found excuses to stay longer after lessons. And I think it hurt him a little. Not because he didn't care about me, but because he did, because he wanted to protect me, because he knew that what I needed was a mentor and a friend, not a romance that could damage us both. Near the end of that summer, he told me he had written a song and he wanted to play it for me. We were sitting in his apartment on a Thursday afternoon, golden light streaming through the windows, and he picked up his guitar and started to play. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard, gentle and melancholy and full of longing. The melody wove through complex finger-picking patterns, rising and falling like a conversation, like a question being asked and answered. He played with his eyes closed, completely absorbed in the music, and I watched him and felt my throat tighten with emotion. When he finished, he opened his eyes and looked at me and said, "I wrote this for you, Owen. I wanted you to have something to remember this summer, to remember that you're not alone, that someone sees you for who you really are." I couldn't speak. I just sat there with tears running down my face, and he put the guitar down and said, "Hey, it's okay, don't cry." But I shook my head and said, "These are good tears, thank you. Thank you for everything, for teaching me guitar and for teaching me about myself, and for this song, I'll never forget it." He smiled, this sad, beautiful smile, and said, "I won't forget it either, I won't forget you." We sat there in the fading light, not touching but close, and I understood that this was goodbye, that the summer was ending and I would go back to school and he would find other students, and this precious bubble of time we had shared was about to burst. My last lesson was in late August. I'd improved dramatically over the summer, could play several pieces competently, but we both knew that wasn't really what the lessons had been about. When it was time to go, he walked me to the door and he hugged me, really hugged me, and said, "You're going to be fine, Owen. You're going to have a good life. Be brave." I wanted to tell him I loved him, but I didn't. I just said thank you for everything, and then I walked down those stairs for the last time, smelling bread and cinnamon, hearing the sound of his guitar starting up again behind me. I left for college a week later, moved to California, built a life. I came out in my 20s, found community, had relationships, a career, adventures. I thought about Adrian often over the years, wondered where he was, what he was doing, if he remembered me. I never tried to find him. That summer felt like something sacred, something that existed in its own perfect bubble, and I was afraid that trying to recapture it would somehow diminish it. But I never forgot the song he wrote for me. I'd only heard it once, but it was burned into my memory, every note, every pause, every emotion. Then last year, 57 years after that summer, I was scrolling through social media and I saw a post from my hometown's historical society about a concert at the community centre, a benefit for music education, featuring local musicians. And there in the list of performers was Adrian's name. My heart stopped. I clicked through to his profile and there he was, 81 years old now, still teaching, still playing, still in the same small town. I stared at his photo for a long time. His hair was white now, his face lined, but his eyes were the same, gentle and kind, and he was holding a guitar. I booked a flight that night. I didn't overthink it, didn't question it, just bought a ticket and arranged to be there for the concert. I didn't tell him I was coming. I wasn't sure he would even remember me. Wasn't sure I had the right to insert myself back into his life after so many years. But I had to see him, had to hear him play, had to know if that summer had meant to him even a fraction of what it had meant to me. The night of the concert, I sat in the back of the community centre, my heart pounding, watching performers come and go. And then Adrian walked onto the stage and I felt 17 again, felt that same rush of recognition, that same sense of coming home. He sat down with his guitar and he spoke to the audience, his voice older but still warm, still patient. He said he wanted to play a piece he had written many years ago in the summer of 1966 for a student who had taught him as much as he had taught them. He said he had played this song countless times over the years, that it reminded him of why he became a teacher, of the profound privilege of witnessing someone discover who they really are. And then he started to play, and it was the same song, note for note, the same melody I had carried in my heart for 57 years. I sat there in the dark with tears streaming down my face, listening to this man I'd loved play the song he wrote for me when I was 17, and I felt the whole arc of my life, all the years and experiences and growth and pain and joy, all of it contained somehow in that music. When he finished, the audience applauded and he smiled and stood to leave the stage. I didn't plan what happened next. I just stood up and I walked down the aisle, and I said, "Adrian." He stopped and looked at me, confused at first, and then his eyes widened and he said, "Owen, is that you?" I nodded and he came down off the stage and we stood there looking at each other, two old men now, decades between us and that summer, and he said, "I can't believe you're here. I can't believe you came." I said, "I never forgot. I never forgot you or that summer or the song. It's been with me my whole life." We talked for hours that night after the concert, catching up on decades, filling in the gaps. He told me he had stayed in teaching, that he had helped dozens of young people over the years find themselves and their voices, that he had thought of me often, wondered if he had done right by me, if I was happy. I told him about my life, about coming out, about my partner of 30 years who had passed away 2 years earlier, about my work and my friends and the full rich life I had built. I told him that summer with him had been the beginning of everything, that he had given me permission to be myself, that I had carried his kindness and his courage with me always. Before I left that night, he played the song for me again, just the two of us in the empty community centre, and this time when he finished I told him what I had never said when I was 17. I said I loved you that summer. I want you to know that. I loved you, and you were so careful with me, so respectful, so kind, and it was exactly what I needed. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and he said, "I loved you too, Owen. I loved you and I wanted to protect you and give you space to grow, and seeing you now, seeing the man you've become, it's the greatest gift I could ask for. I'm 74 years old now. Adrian is 81. We talk on the phone every week. I've been back to visit him 3 more times. We're not lovers, never were, never will be, but we're something deeper than that, something that doesn't have an easy name. He was the first person who saw me, really saw me, and he was brave enough to help me see myself. The song he wrote for me in 1966 still plays in my head when I need courage, when I need to remember who I am, when I need to feel connected to that 17-year-old boy who walked up a narrow staircase and found someone who changed his life. Some loves are about romance and some are about recognition, about being witnessed, about someone caring enough to help you become yourself. Adrian gave me that, and he's still giving it to me, still playing that song, still reminding me that I'm not alone, that I never was.